What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic, and it's no secret out there that Warner Brothers is up for sale. There's been lots of rumors about Paramount making offers and other entities being interested, perhaps even Netflix, but many have figured Comcast would at least take a look at buying Warner Brothers or some of their assets, and it seems like that is currently underway, and these talks are getting more serious. And I think if this does happen and Comcast ends up even with some of the IPs from Warner Brothers, this could have direct impacts in the theme parks. So we're going to talk about, is Comcast really going to make a serious offer and what this could mean for the theme parks and maybe change the Universal parks going forward if they do make this deal. So obviously some of this video is going over current rumors out there, and some of it is going to be speculation about if they were to buy this, what could happen. But I do think that it's a possibility here, which is why I'm going to talk about it. So the first story we have is from Variety, and this was from November 6th, and it said Comcast taps bankers to explore bid for Warner Brothers Discovery assets. Now, before we even get going, I know one thing people are going to say, and I have the same questions, which is, I don't really know how Comcast is going to be able to purchase Warner Brothers, given that they have a lot of debt themselves. They have like $90 billion worth of debt. It's a lot of debt. But again, I don't do, corporate finance. I'm sure they could probably make it happen if they want to. I wouldn't think that bankers would be looking at this if it wasn't possible. So I don't know on that end of things. I have skepticism because of that. But obviously, it seems that these talks are actually getting pretty serious. We have another article that even shows as of today, it's getting a lot more serious. So it says Comcast has taken a step closer to making an offer for parts of Warner Brothers Discovery. But it also goes on to say, again, not Warner Brothers in its entirety, with the retention of 2 banking advisors, Variety has confirmed. Comcast is among the players looking to potentially cut an M&A deal with Warner Brothers, which officially put itself on the block last month. Others seeking a play for Warner Brothers include David Ellison's Paramount Skydance, which has made offers for the whole company, and Netflix. Comcast has hired Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley to evaluate a potential bid for the Warner Brothers assets and has gained access to Warner Brothers financial data, a source familiar with the matter said. Comcast is in the process of splitting off most of NBC Universal's cable networks into a new company, Versant, a transaction expected to be completed by the end of 2025. The thinking is that Comcast would look to bid for Warner Brothers streaming and studios businesses. Warner Brothers Discovery itself has been in the process of separating into 2 entities. Warner Brothers, it says HBO Max and Studios, and then Discovery Global, which is the TV networks and Discovery Plus. Warner Brothers board said it would consider a deal structure that would enable a merger of Warner Brothers, the streaming and studio side, with a third-party acquirer alongside a spinoff of Discovery Global to shareholders, which would make sense because nobody's really going to be interested in network assets, especially Comcast, considering they have essentially, as of right now, a melting ice cube of broadband and cable as they're shifting more toward the theme parks. That's kind of what they're trying to do as a company, because they're just losing money and even saying openly that this is going to continue to happen when it comes to that end of their business. So Comcast doesn't want anything to do with the networks. I think it's mostly studios and obviously the streaming side, because Peacock is not a strong streamer by any means. And so if they were able to get HBO Max, that is going to be a big boon for them on the streaming side. Mike Cavanaugh, Comcast co-CEO, told analysts during the cable and media giant's Q3 earnings call that the bar is high for the company to consider a major merger of acquisition. But he didn't rule anything out and suggested that Comcast's ability to secure federal approval for any transaction would improve once the Versant spinoff of its linear cable channels, other than Bravo, is completed. Kavanaugh said that, quote, more things are viable than maybe some of the public commentary that's out there. And so that is something I've also had a concern also, not only the debt that you have with Comcast, which is probably what he's referring to here as part of his statement of saying they're going to spin off into Versant, and that's probably going to free up a lot of debt as it basically they're just going to move it over to that new spinoff company. But also they would be looked at as smaller at that point and potentially wouldn't have the regulation issues, which I've also brought up because Comcast is much bigger than, say, Paramount. But if they're able to spin this off, essentially that might free them up to get more regulation approval for this. So I think that's probably the 2 things he may be referring to there when people are kind of questioning, can Comcast really do this? So we have that news, and then today it actually broke, and this is from The Wrap here. It says Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav meets with Comcast chief Brian Roberts as sale talks ramp up. It says Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav met with Comcast CEO Brian Roberts last week as the latter explores a potential bid for the former's studio and streaming assets. So obviously the talks between them are heating up. I mean, Brian Roberts is not going to go talk to David Zaslav just to hang out, I'm assuming, and being reported like this. So it seems like these talks are getting a lot more closer to an actual offer. Comcast has not made an offer yet. The only company that has made an offer is Paramount, which all those have been rejected. So this definitely seems like it's feasible and getting closer to at least an offer being out there. Which also brings me to the point, let's say that Comcast does end up with Warner Brothers assets. Not all, of course, not everything, but let's say they end up with obviously Harry Potter, which this is likely one of the reasons that they would like to get some of these assets is because the Universal theme parks have basically been built, at least in the current era, off of the back of the Wizarding Worlds. And Comcast is currently pivoting more toward the theme parks, obviously investing into Epic Universe and wanting to make more money there, again, because they have a depreciating asset of all these, broadband and cable assets that they have. So it makes a lot of sense that they would want to protect one of the biggest things associated with their parks, which is Harry Potter, and be able to control that, because one thing if you're Universal Comcast is you don't want the rights to end up with somebody else that you may not have a good relationship with and run into a problem, given that it's a third party. Comcast does not own Harry Potter, where you would potentially lose out on those in the theme parks. So it's a risk that the Wizarding Worlds are not owned by Comcast. So this is probably one reason they want to try and shore that up, is because they don't want that potential risk out there of losing out on those in their theme parks. Now, the other thing about Warner Brothers is they control DC.
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
And it's also been talked about many times about, would Universal ever get rid of Marvel Superhero Island? That has been a part of Islands of Adventure since the park opened, but now, of course, Marvel is owned by Disney. And essentially, Marvel Superhero Island is a time capsule. They're not going to change anything in this land. They will update rides and attractions according to the agreement that they made back in the 90s, but they're not going to be able to bring in the MCU in here or really do anything else with this land. And essentially, I've often argued Universal will hold on to this land just to keep it out of the hands of Disney, because even though it wouldn't be immediate, eventually Disney would turn around and use Marvel into the Disney parks, especially talking about Disney World. They have them out in Disneyland, but the deal involving the Marvel contract is everything east of the Mississippi, essentially Universal controls. And obviously that's a big thing to keep out of your biggest competitor's hands. And I've said many times, the only way you're going to get this replaced is if Disney backs up the Brinks truck and pays for those rights, which I don't even know where those would be. I'm assuming a lot of money. We'll just say, I don't know if it's into the billions, but it's a lot of money, I'm sure, that Comcast would ask for the theme park rights to Marvel. Or the other scenario is that Universal ends up with an IP that they own and control that they think would be more profitable to put into their parks and no longer have to mess with this whole Marvel arrangement. Especially as Universal is currently in the process of going to add new things to their existing parks, Islands of Adventure, Universal Studios. There's lots of rumors out there, but they are going to definitely ramp those parks up in the next decade to bring them up closer to the level of Epic Universe, and of course competing more with Disney, trying to eat into more market share. So Marvel Superhero Island being in a time capsule is going to end up being a handicap for them, because essentially you just have a part of Islands of Adventure that you really can't do anything with. And at what point does it become just a hindrance to just hold on to that to keep it out of Disney's hands? So if they're able to get some of these assets from Warner Brothers that do include DC, they could potentially look at putting DC into the Universal theme parks to replace Marvel Superhero Island. Now, I know what you're going to say, and I completely agree. The DC rights are currently locked up with Six Flags.
Sergeant Buzzkill once again.
But Six Flags isn't doing so well. Here's an article from Attractions Magazine. This was November 7th. Six Flags says closing or selling more parks is a priority. It says Six Flags may close or sell more of its theme parks after already shuttering several. Brian Winthrow, Executive VP and CFO of Six Flags, expressed that getting the portfolio smaller and more nimble is a priority. So we're going to look at the parks where our returns are the greatest, where the opportunities for growth are the highest, and we're going to focus on those parks, and the other parks we'll look to monetize and use those proceeds to reduce debt.
I'm listening.
And then if you look at just the actual finances of it, it says in the latest earnings call for the third quarter of 2025, Six Flags reported a net loss of $1.2 billion, which included a significant $1.5 billion non-cash impairment charge. So Six Flags is not doing great. So if Universal is able to make this deal with Warner Brothers, that would also include the DC movie rights, and then they would be in control of the DC universe. Given where Six Flags is at, I don't think it's a big leap to think that Universal could come to Six Flags and say, how much do you want for the DC rights? Because Six Flags is not really in a position to really be turning away money. It's not like they're making money off the DC stuff at this point. So I think that's actually a smaller hill to climb in terms of, being able to get these into the park. I think the biggest hill to climb would be making a deal with Warner Brothers, getting that approved by the government. But if that were to happen, I think getting these rights from Six Flags would kind of just be a formality. I don't think it would be that big of a deal considering, again, where Six Flags is. And then if Universal is able to get control of the DC theme park rights, I think that basically at that point, Universal would be much more open, I suppose you could say, to the idea of handing over the Marvel rights to Disney that they can use in their theme parks if it meant that they could put DC into their parks and also control that IP. So they can sit there and say, we're going to develop a brand new DC universe, control it completely, and then sync that into the theme parks. I think if you're looking at that type of scenario, I would be much more online with that if I was Universal than just holding on to an IP, again, that Disney controls, that you also have to share profits with. I mean, there is, Disney is making money off of Marvel being in Universal, but you would have complete control of the IP, complete control of it in the theme parks, and then you can basically do whatever you want to do, including what I would love, which would be Gotham City or the Daily Planet. There's all sorts of things you could do here that would bring new life and blood and enthusiasm into Islands of Adventure. And I think they'd be much more likely to do this now, given where the MCU also is, which is not in a great position. Obviously, you have Doomsday coming up, which will probably do pretty well, but the future of the MCU is definitely up in the air. But they would have the potential of not only controlling DC, but even potentially it becoming bigger than where the MCU currently is. So Universal could actually be in control of the biggest comic book movie franchise currently out there that they could utilize in their theme parks, which would be the ultimate win for Universal, as they benefited somewhat, I would say, off of the success of the MCU. I'm sure many people went to Marvel Superhero Island because of how big the MCU was. And then you would rid yourselves of this limited thing that you currently have, given when they made that deal for Marvel that was not owned by Disney, they were not doing well, and it was a discount deal that they got. And you could exchange it for a more popular, potentially, I'm not saying it will be, but potentially a bigger comic book franchise in terms of the movies and have an even bigger impact on your theme parks. And again, we've seen what Universal is capable of with the Wizarding Worlds, with Super Nintendo World, with Epic Universe. And I think if they were able to do that, you would see them do some pretty impressive things. And yet again, have another asset in their theme parks that not only resonates with pop culture, as the Wizarding Worlds have, as Super Nintendo World does, but DC Comics and the legacy of those characters having cross-generational appeal, I think yet again could be a major win for Universal Studios. And even if the DC universe in the movie side didn't really take off, you still have marketable names of Superman and Batman, so you wouldn't be completely reliant on the movies being successful. I still think if you had Gotham City, Superman, like these characters in your theme park, they would be a draw, even if the movie side wasn't doing great or they just put that on pause. So I'm not saying that it is going to happen. I'm just simply saying, looking at this recent news here, I would not be shocked if that is in play. And I think the idea of a DC land in Islands of Adventure would be fantastic. But either way, that is going to be it, though, for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, do you agree with me, or do you think I'm off my rocker, or you just waiting to see how this all plays out? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.